Hello and welcome to Lecture 5 on Social Psychology. So in this lecture we're going to talk about obedience, and I want to start by looking at Milgram's obedience study. So in the Moodle, in the Chapter 12 Social Psychology Lecture Videos folder, you'll find a video titled Milgram Obedience Study. I'd like you to go watch that now, please. Welcome back. Milgram's study is pretty disturbing. I'd like you to think about this study throughout the day and think about, I think all of us want to say that we would not go up to 450 volts. I think we all really want to say that. Social science is pretty clear that we are capable, all of us are capable of doing some pretty heinous things. And I think Milgram's study is brilliant. There are some serious ethical issues with Milgram's study, and we'll talk about that. But his study is brilliant. So, obedience is when a person follows the orders of a person of authority. One of the reasons the field of social psychology came about is World War II. So once the concentration camps were discovered, there was a big question. Why was it that there were all of these soldiers working in the camps doing truly evil things and justifying it by saying, I was just following orders? I was just following orders. I don't know if you're very familiar with the Nuremberg trials, but I've been kind of going through some of the research on the trials, and some of the testimony is so tragic. Some of the defenses that soldiers used was really so disturbing. And the idea that I was just following orders, that would be a good enough defense. It didn't work for any of them. But the reason the field of social psychology came about is psychologists wanted to understand what is it about social situations that lead people to be obedient. What is it? We call it the power of the social situation. Trying to look at, how powerful is our social situations in shaping our behavior, our feelings, and our cognitions. I think Milgram does a great job of exploring that question, and that was one of his main goals, was to explore the concept of the power of the social situation. Milgram's research demonstrated that ordinary people may do horrible things when ordered to do so by an authority. What fascinates me about Milgram's study is that, yes, the subjects were ordered to continue with the study by an authority figure, but they weren't being blocked from leaving the room. They were just told, you have to continue. You've got to keep going. You cannot stop. You must keep going for the purpose of the experiment. Now, I want to be really clear that some people did just say, no, I don't have to keep going. Some people did stop. And that is encouraging to see that not everyone follows authority when they become very, very uncomfortable with what's happening in the moment. In his study, one of the things they found was that individuals who are concerned about others' perceptions of them are more likely to be obedient. And obedience decreases with greater distance from the authority figure. So in the video, you saw that the authority figure was in the room with the teacher, with the actual subject. and, wearing a lab coat, looking very official and authoritative and science-y, and using a very, in research, we will use scripts. The phrases that we use are scripted so that we use the same terminology with all of the subjects to the best of our ability. And, you see that in that video that, you must continue. You need to continue for the purpose of the experiment. Now, the authority figure was right in the room with them, pretty close to them. And that, as research has branched off from Milgram's experiments, they do find that obedience is less likely when there's greater distance from the authority figure. So, Milgram's research question: will individuals cause harm to others when commanded to by authority figures? I think Milgram did a pretty good job of showing that yes, they will. 26 out of 40 subjects, or 63%, continued to deliver shocks up to 450 volts. 40 out of 40 subjects, 100%, continued to deliver shocks up to 300 volts. Now, the labeling on the panel for delivering the electric shocks is pretty clear that, okay, now you're getting into the more severe shock, very severe shock. So the subjects understand that, okay, well, 250 is very, very, very different than a 400 volt shock. The terminology is very descriptive. So I think the video does a pretty good job of explaining all of this. The Confederate, the man who plays the learner, but who's actually part of the research assistant, does such a great job with the acting. I thought he's just brilliant. And something that is encouraging is that in the first condition, almost all of the participants tried to quit. But the experimenter would keep saying, you must continue. You must continue for the purpose of the experiment. It's very important that you continue. Now, nearly two-thirds of those subjects obeyed, but there is a condition where that number went down to fewer than 30% of participants. And that's when the teacher had to hold the learner's hand down on the plate that delivers the fake electric shock. That was kind of the line that was too much for the vast majority of the subjects. Actually holding the person's hand on the shock plate was too much, and less than 30%. So, we're going from 63% to less than 30% obeyed when that condition changed. And the conclusion is most people will obey even hideous orders given by insistent authority figures, but this willingness is lessened when people are made more personally responsible. Okay. So here's the panel, and you can see that in your textbook as well. Let's see. Now, Milgram, before doing the study, let me check my next slide really quick. Okay. Before doing the study, asked psychologists, he asked a lot of different people for their prediction. Like, how many people do you think will actually deliver 450 volts? And they all said very, 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 very few. No one expected Milgram to get these results. And I think that's one of the things, I think we're all still shocked somewhat by Milgram's experiment. I am still shocked that he got that level of obedience in his study. The subjects could leave at any time. They were just told to keep going. So it was predicted that fewer than 10% would obey completely and provide the maximum level of shock. It ended up that 63%, 65% were obedient to the maximum level of shock. Now, Milgram and others have done variations in the conditions. So when there's two teachers, so you've got the learner who is a Confederate, and then you have two teachers. One is Confederate and one is the subject. If there's two teachers and the Confederate just keeps going without any protest, the subject doesn't protest continuing. Only 3 out of 40 protested continuing at all. When women were the teachers and the learners, the number was about the same. There was very little difference. When the learner mentions mild heart trouble, we see this in the video, no difference. When the learner stops saying anything, no difference. When they moved the study from Yale to an office building, the number did go down. And I find this interesting because, Yale has such a stellar reputation. And, businesses and office buildings, I think, we all go in and out of office buildings. We're familiar with those environments. We're not familiar, most of us are not familiar with research labs in Yale University. And so the authority figure was perceived as more authoritative on the Yale campus. They believe that that's why there was a lower compliance rate in the office building. The learner agrees to participate only if he can quit when he wants to, and then later asks to quit. Compliance decreased. Obedience decreased. If the teacher could see the learner, obedience decreased by 23%. And then here's the shock plate. Numbers really start to plummet with that. 30% would continue delivering maximum shock up to 450 if they had to force the learner's hand onto the plate. If the experimenter left the room after giving instructions, only 23% were obedient. And that's where Milgram figured out the distance between the authority figure and obedience matters. And when the task was split among 3 people, the teacher's tasks, 2 of whom are Confederates and 1 of whom refuses to continue, only 10% obeyed all the way up to 450 volts. Now, Berger and his colleagues did a replication of this study in 2007, published in 2009. He did make some big changes to make the study more ethical. I believe they only went up to 150 volts. They made sure that immediately after the study, the teacher came in the room, met the learner, and explained, I wasn't shocked at all. It's all good. I don't have a heart condition. We're fine. And Berger was very sure to give resources to his subjects and Milgram wasn't good about that. He did follow up with his subjects over time, but he didn't really give them resources to use if they kind of had emotional consequences to being a subject to this study. So I'm posting the replication study on Moodle in the Social Psychology Resources folder, so you can find it there. Thank you.